I just went to work at a sawmill. It was like anything else. It's something you just did for a living. And later I just got to hauling lumber with a truck. And naturally, but cutting timber and stuff, somehow somebody come up with a wood chopper.
He had that across the top of his above a windshield.
It's not coming from having the last name Wood. It comes from the sawmill part of it with the wood chopper.
And when he'd pull into the racetrack and the announcer would say, "Well, here comes the wood chopper from Stewart, Virginia," you knew that you had a challenger that night.
Wood chopper chops his way to victory. I remember that one time you won the race.
To this day, the people in town, when they see me, they'll say, "Hello, wood chopper."
Glen Wood, he was the master.
You're going to see one of the great pit crews of all time right now, the Wood Brothers.
His pit crew get a tremendous amount of credit.
The Wood Brothers, some of the nicest people in auto racing.
He made a lot of people famous.
Am I dreaming right now?
The Wood Brothers return to victory lane at Daytona.
Trevor Bayne gets the win for the Wood Brothers. The famous red and white, number 21.
Am I dreaming right now?
Well, this is fairy tale stuff. This is like once upon a time.
The glass slipper fit.
The youngest driver here with the oldest continuous racing team. The legendary Wood Brothers.
Years ago, when we had a garden at home, we used to use a mule or a horse to plow it, and then you'd take a hoe and chop the weeds out all the way. And somewhere along the line, I decided there's something better to do than that. And now that I'm the age I am, it seems like I'm lost if I don't have a garden. If you grow a good crop, you're proud of it. It looks good, and it just, sometimes they do good and sometimes they don't. So that's sort of in racing, sometimes you do well and sometimes not so well. I guess you get a taste for something like that, and I just like to grow it and see something grow.
The joyful harvest of a life lived to its fullest is a reflection of a seed nurtured by its surroundings. For nearly 2 centuries, this beech tree has shaded long-held family land. Its enduring strength, a reflection of a people, the Wood family. Rooted at the base of the Blue Ridge Mountains, the tree matured into a gentle giant. The breadth of its canopy respected far and wide. From this fertile soil emerges the story of Glen Wood.
There's a lovely tree in the dooryard down there. In fact, it's been chosen as one of the 100 most beautiful trees in Virginia. It's in a big, one of those coffee table books. It's right there on the farm in Stewart. They have the family picnics there underneath that tree. They're very proud of that tree.
The history behind it was unusual because a lot of trees don't survive as long as this tree, and it has a spring under. We think the spring had something to do with its longevity.
And that's the tree that when Glen Wood drove his first car and Brother Leonard helped him build it, they'd throw a chain up over a big limb in it and pull the motor out and put another one in. I think they're the first shade tree mechanics. I mean, it's that kind of down-home thing that was stock car racing before it blossomed.
Most everybody was a shade tree mechanic in that time.
Glen was born in the summer of 1925 in rural Southwest Virginia. Along with a sister, there were 5 Wood brothers: Clay, Glen, Ray Lee, Delano, and Leonard. Glen's mother, Ada, was a strong-willed but compassionate homemaker. His daddy, J. Walter, took on work where he could, from the coal mines to the local Ford garage. The Wood brothers learned by example, as J. Walter proved that necessity was sometimes a father of invention.
Daddy was a very talented mechanic. He was counted as the best mechanic in Patrick County. Anytime you realize you got a problem, you can't start a screw in a hard-to-get-to place or whatever, well, he come up with the idea, you just make him something to hold the screw to start it, you know. And I watched him right in front of a fireplace make these screwdrivers. This housing and all, he would stick it in the fireplace, heat it, and then hammer it flat on a anvil, and then do all this cutaway here with nothing but a file.
He'd be filing away like that, but he smoked. Had the old cigarette and the smoke kind of leaning over like that, and the smoke run right up his eye like that. He'd close one eye and he'd keep a filing away on it and polishing it and everything.
How come you think Leonard got to where he is in this business? He inherited that for sure.
If they didn't have it, they didn't have money to go get it, to buy whatever it was, they'd make it. They gotta have it, you need it. You just figure out a way to make it.
The innovation and work ethic of J. Walter was planted into his sons, and that environment cultivated NASCAR's longest-lasting team. Glen formed Wood Brothers Racing in 1950, when he was 25. NASCAR was in its infancy, but the limb of this beech tree was already aged enough to support Glen's budding interest in racing.
Glen and Ray at that time was hauling lumber, and then Delano began to haul lumber a little later. There used to be a big rivalry between trucks, Ford, Chevrolet, Dodge, and GMC as to what pulled the most lumber, you know. I had the 1.5-ton Ford, and you had the 2 tons, and you could just run off and leave me up them hills, too. You remember that? When racing come along, we was ready to go, you know. It was already fired up in sort of a competitive way.
This is on mountain roads. He's talking about spinning them out and, you know, doing like a bootleg turn with a truck, you know, and then get after us for driving fast.
You can't do that now.
Yeah.
We did run some on the streets here. There weren't as many cars out there as is today, and cars didn't run that fast then either. And of course, my mom would tell them every time they left, "Don't run fast now, don't." And they didn't want to tell them that because they knew that's what they was going to want to do.
It was a long time he wouldn't admit to doing none of that stuff. As you get older, you'll go ahead and tell stuff you did because, you know, it's kind of got that...
cool factor.
Well, the statute of limitations has run out, or they can't get after you for it or something, you know?
I did have a lumber truck one time, and I got out on the track at Hillsboro. It's a mile track. I'd just been watching racing, so the track was open, so I just made a lap. But all I did was create a big dust behind me.
His first trip to Daytona was in 1947, and he didn't start driving until 1950, so, you know, he was a fan of the sport long before he started driving.
I think it was the excitement, the speed, the daredevilness.
One particular daredevil Glen noticed was a former lumberman himself, Curtis Turner.
You know, Curtis was a wide-open, kind of wild man. They were both from that same section of Southwest Virginia. But Curtis had been a bootlegger, and Glen had come from a family that was very religious and all that kind of stuff. They had nothing in common other than where they were from. But that meant a lot.
They'd drive, all load up and drive to Daytona Beach to watch Curtis Turner.
He'll tell you to this day, Curtis Turner was the best ever lived.
That was his first hero, was Curtis Turner.
In Turner, Glen saw a Virginia boy hard at work. While it wasn't standard work, the trophies showed it was work well done. In 1950, with help from a friend at the sawmill and his brothers at home, Glen bought a race car, though he was nearly burned by the investment.
First car we had was 38 Ford Coupe, and Chris Williams and I, we were in the sawmill business together, and naturally we bought the car together. So we had it behind the car, towing it flat, towing it on the ground. Then we got halfway home and the axle broke and it fell down on the road and caught fire and burned up right in the middle of Route 58. And we sat there for 30 minutes, I guess, with it just burning. We dragged it home and I guess we thought it was about over. And somebody said, well, maybe old Glen scared him up and he won't do that no more. So that must have lit a little fire or something.
The 25-year-old driver and his band of brothers would need that fiery determination. Comments against a so-called career as a racer were almost as heated as the competition on the track. Competition that included Glen's racing hero.
Curtis Turner was driving one time at Bowman Gray Stadium. Curtis spun Glen. And some of us talking about how rough it was out there. Curtis said, yes, wasn't it rough out there? Of course, Curtis won the race, but Glen didn't, but spun him out.
I remember one time Bobby Myers and Curtis, they'd all had little run-ins or something, and Bobby was going to go over and fuss at Curtis a little bit. Yeah, but there's another time when he came over there with a tire tool and was going to whip up on Curtis, and Curtis pulled out a little pistol and says, what are you going to do with that? And he said, I was just trying to find a place to lay it down.
Times that I was privileged to race against Glen, he did seem to have a different game face when he got in the race car. He was very intense.
He was a good, hard driver, but not a reckless type. If he couldn't take you with his kind of driving, he wouldn't, knock you out or something other to get by you.
And I've never seen him get out of a car and run to somebody and get him a nape of the neck. Like, never. He wasn't that type of a driver.
I drove clean. I never really spun anybody out to speak of. Tried to drive under control all the time. What I thought I could do, it paid off.
Glen's cool driving style made hot laps around the circuits of the Southeast. Soon, the woodchopper was topping the biggest names in NASCAR.
I saw Richard Petty. He was just beginning. I didn't even worry about him as a driver. He was young, and I could beat him about anywhere he went then. But then there was Papa Lee on the other side, and that was a different story.
One of his more satisfying wins was beating Lee Petty.
Lee told Glen, said, if you pass me, says, you're going to do it on the outside. Says, you're not going to get it on the inside.
There was a slow car coming off of turn 2 that was on the bottom, and Lee went out wide, and the car turned out into the infield. And so he just slipped right up in his place. And he said, it just got all over Lee, so then Lee was trying to catch him to bump him and turn him around, but he never did. And, it's beat Lee Petty. That was a big win.
Bowman Gray Stadium was one of our favorite tracks, I guess, one of them. All of a sudden, we just hit the right combination. Glen goes out and wins like 4 in a row. I always thought the best way to pass a guy on the outside at the stadium would have been go in and then cut in and get right beside of him, not hit him exactly, but get beside of him. He would pull you around until you got on the straightaway and you had the best shot going off.
Yeah. And you'd gain a foot, the next lap you'd gain a foot, another foot, and once you got beside of him, then it just blended out and long gone then.
He waited his time. He paced himself. He was on the guy, right at him. But when that guy make a little move, he was there.
He could run with the best of them. I mean, he's outrun Curtis Turner over there and all of them. He was good as they come at Bowman Gray.
With Glen at the wheel, Leonard under the hood, and brothers and cousins in the pits, the team reshaped the approach to building a car. One that molded Glen's driving style to the demands of competition.
At Bowman Gray Stadium, you always needed extra traction coming off a corner to keep them spinning. So we decided to move the motor back,
and every time we'd pull it back a little bit, the starter would hit the frame, or we'd cut that out, and then something else would hit over here, and we ended up and pulled it back 2 feet.
Well, now the seat had to be moved back, and he ended up in the back seat.
That is plain common sense, to put that weight back there so that they get better traction coming off of the turns. And that's what every racer wants to do.
I was selling peanuts and popcorn in the grandstands at Bowman Gray Stadium when Glen Wood, Curtis Turner, Billy and Bobby Myers were racing over there. And I remember when Glen brought the old number 16 coach, he was sitting in the back seat.
I didn't know how I was going to drive it because it put me back in the back seat, and you're looking out over the front fender way over yonder, looked like, and had weight enough on the back that I could use the throttle to pick that wheel up and down. And a lot of times they'd carry it all the way to the other end before I let it down.
Thing just raise up, just grab it and go way down the straightaway, and it just come right on back down. That's just how smooth he was, and he was always a smooth driver.
Boy, Glen would just smoke him and an old coach out there.
Well, they kind of laughed about it to start with, but when the season was over, they weren't laughing. We won the championship with it that year.
In the mid-50s, automakers were looking to turn weekend success into weekday sales. That brand name backing sold Glen on a move up to Grand National Racing to partner with another family-based auto business.
Ford had the factory teams. Curtis Turner and Joe Weatherly suggested to Ford that they bring us on board. It really started on the Ford Motor Company.
Glen Wood built a relationship early with Ford, and they liked his style, and still do.
If you ask for a common thread in Ford racing, it's the Wood brothers. I mean, they started with us so early in their careers that I think they just decided they didn't want to change.
Well, Peter DiPaolo was the head of the Ford Racing, and he gave me a call and congratulated me on how I was doing. He said, well, what do you need? I said, well, the car's ready to go to Richmond now, and all I need would be a set of tires. So he had them to roll me out 6 tires, and we went to Richmond and won that race. Till this day, we've been with Ford ever since.
When you stop to think that he raced dirt, he raced asphalt, he raced the sand, he raced in modified, sportsman, convertible. You know, all those totaled together, it's almost 100 victories.
Glen's diverse collection of race wins rivaled his diverse skills overseeing the race team. Gradually, his time in the cockpit of the number 21 took a back seat to the demands of business.
64 at Starkey was the last race I ran in. Marvin Panch and I and John Moose promoted that race. Marvin was driving the car most of the time then, and I'd sort of slacked off, and I'd been running with the modified there, and I'd won about 7 or 8 in a row, and we felt like if I drove, I might draw more people, so that was the reason I was in it that night.
Well, me and Glen had found a place in Winston-Salem that recapped tires, and they was a lot softer than the tires you could buy. And I think me and him was the only two that knew about it. Well, I run over something and cut one of my tires.
They came over and said, could we look at your best tire and see if we can put it with our best one, and maybe we can finish the race with it.
He wasn't wanting to lend me a tire because I was on the same setup that he had, and one of us is going to win the race.
So I let him have it, thinking he'd probably blow it out anyway. But I knew if it lasted, he'd lap the field with it. I guess 5 or 6 laps from the end, I felt something tap him in the back end. Who is that? And I looked, and it was Pearson and Cotton Owens Dodge. And there was 2 Fords in front of me, and I think, well, I'm not going to let him by if I can help it.
Yeah, he kept, cutting me off, stuff like that, but he come apologized after the race and told me that, he said, I hated to do that. He said, well, I was promoting a race, and I didn't really have the money, to pay off, so I had to do what I could to, save as much as I could.
And sure enough, I did outrun him in the race. But he was the promoter. He did what he needed to do to promote the race.
And had I known that'd been the last race I'd drive in, he wouldn't have ever got those tires.
The racing career of Glen Wood started under the shade of a dignified beech tree in Southwest Virginia. As Glen and Wood Brothers Racing grew, NASCAR grew. The number 21 car and team were an emerging force in a sport reaching toward the future.
You can tell by looking at Charlotte Motor Speedway that it has a special personality of its own. The front stretch bends twice between the 4th and 1st turns. Turns are banked at 24 degrees. The track is big, beautiful, dangerous.
Curtis Turner opened Charlotte Motor Speedway in and for its fall race promote Glen's 21 with Speedy Thompson at the wheel.
When it was rough, it was the first year I just wasn't driving. I wasn't going to drive it down there, and we decided we'll put Speedy in our car, and so after a while, Speedy was running fast as he was, wasn't it?
He just run right on them all day long, and then end up winning the race.
Just shortly before that, I had wondered if we could keep going. It had just got to be a rough time. Luckily, we went down there, and Speedy won the race.
We never won no race like that, I said, well, how much this thing pay? He says, $10,000. Oh, man, that was a million now,
And Paul Sawyer at Richmond come up just shortly after and said, I'll give you $2,500 to bring that car to Richmond. Speedy went up there and won that. And he also said, if you bring Weatherly in your other car, I'll give you $1,000 for that. So we had $3,500 to go up there, and that might have been more than the purse was.
At a time when NASCAR held 40 to 60 events a year, Glen ran a partial schedule. He was always aware of what it took to compete within his given resources. By entering the bigger events, the ones that paid the most, he could efficiently keep his family-run team competitive. and the achievements of the 21 soon became legendary.
It's the 1963 running of the Daytona 500. And today we should see one whale of an automobile race.
Here's Tiny Lund. Tiny is in this car today that was assigned to Marvin Panch.
A week before the big race, Panch flipped on the track in a sports car, and he was pulled to safety by Tiny Lund, another driver. Tiny has been racing 18 years without a major win. Crew chief and car owner Glen Wood put it this way.
We wanted him to drive, one thing, because Marvin suggested it, and two, you have to have a good driver. And Tiny always drove hard, and we figured he could do it.
Still a three-car race as Freddie Lorenzen, Ned Jarrett, and Tiny Lund continue this bumper-to-bumper drafting as we go in to the final laps of the Daytona 500.
Lorenzen, the leader, is pitting. He's coming in for gas.
10 laps from the end, Lorenzen come down pit road.
Lorenzen is coming into the pit area. Ned Jarrett is taking over the lead. Tiny Lund is in second place.
5 laps to go. Ned Jarrett was next.
Second gasoline victim coming in with car number 11 for just a few pints of gas.
Tiny Lund has a firm hold on first place. If his fuel will hold out.
Well, it went another lap or two. Well, when the Wood brothers coming in? They'd come up and ask us. I said, well, we don't plan to.
The checkered flag for Tiny Lund, the man who got his chance and came through.
Tiny said he run out of gas on the last lap.
The crew joins him in the winner's circle for the glory of getting home first and the biggest purse ever offered in a stock car race.
After that 1963 Daytona 500 win, they were just the car to beat at almost every track that you went to.
Even though Glen was no longer driving, he remained the one steering the company. And everyone at the shop in Stuart, Virginia was on board with the plan.
He was one guy that you could tell when he was racing would make a good car owner because he knew how to get along with people. He knew how to motivate people. Plus, he had all those brothers sitting up there in Stuart with nothing to do.
Car number 21 coming in to the most skilled pit crew in the world, probably, the Wood brothers. Glen and Leonard and Delano and all the others.
The sixth sense between Glen and his 4 brothers on pit road transformed racing. Using the innovative Wood spirit to modernize and finally choreograph each movement, they addressed the problems that cost other teams valuable seconds on pit road.
When you lose 30 seconds standing still, there's hardly no way to make it back if the competition's running 137 miles an hour or better. David Pearson brings the Purelator Mercury in, and the Wood brothers are on it.
There, coming in. Coming in.
Glen Wood told us what happens on a pit stop.
Well, I usually stop the car, and Leonard changes the front tire, and Rap Ed with the back. Delano, other brother, uses the jack. And Clay, another brother, helps with the back wheel. But then if anybody gets done a little ahead, and there's something yet to do, which one gets done first does it.
I didn't have to wonder what Ray was going to do. I didn't have to wonder what Leonard was going to do.
He never chewed us out because he knew we was doing our very best.
David Pearson with the Woods Brothers Mercury. They have become a legend in NASCAR Grand National Stock Car Racing.
Anybody that can keep brothers together and keep them motivated is the greatest manager in the world.
Glen had a team that won races from pit road, a car that could outlast the rest of the field. And because he knew what it took to drive a team, the best drivers in the world were eager to join the Wood brothers.
No matter who the driver was, everybody always turned into like an adoptive adopted part of our family.
Glen had that unique ability to know what Ford wanted out of them and what kind of drivers to put in his car, and he made a lot of people famous.
Anybody who was a race driver would love to drive that car number 21.
When you look at the 50 greatest drivers that NASCAR says is their 50 greatest drivers, 20 some odd of them have driven for Glen Wood.
Another one of our outstanding drivers was Dan Gurney. We went to Riverside. He won 4 races for us out there. He was just one of the best at that time in road racing.
Dan Gurney, and then Parnetta Jones won for us.
Parnelli Jones on the very first lap, past 18 cars.
I ran 5 years for him, and I never enjoyed driving for anybody more than I enjoyed driving for the Wood Brothers.
Cale Yarborough, winner of the race in car number 21.
It was such a great honor to get in that car and really drive a hell of a race car.
He wins the Daytona 500, and that's an appropriate size. While the jubilation goes on with the Woods brothers.
And Glenn called one day and asked me, would I like to run for them? And I said, Lord, yeah. You know, that tickled me to death. I didn't go to a race that I didn't feel like I could win.
David Pearson's done it. Silver clock as he storms across the finish line to win for the 8th time at the Michigan International Speedway.
When you got those kind of drivers driving for you, your stock goes up.
I went up to Stewart, Virginia, and walked in and looked at the pictures on the wall of the people that had won races for the Wood Brothers and going, wow, I hope I didn't bite off too big a piece there.
Checkered flag for Buddy Baker.
I still pinch myself that I got an opportunity. It's unbelievable.
The humble beginnings of Glen Wood's race team make his impact on NASCAR all the more impressive. In addition to the decades of success, the reach of this shade tree mechanic shows his lasting influence and the admiration for his character.
We went to Indianapolis in 1965. John Cowley came to me at Darlington and said, how would you like to go to Indianapolis? I said, I don't know. Why? He says, to pit Jimmy Clark. I thought he was kidding.
We had already had the pit stops worked out in the stock cars, and Clark had had some problems in the year before, and they just wanted the Wood Brothers to pit Jim Clark.
They were the best of the best at that time when Jimmy Clark took that car to Indianapolis.
The 1965 Indianapolis 500 was an important opportunity for Ford. Open-wheel legend Jim Clark would pilot an innovative rear-engine car, with further innovation coming from a NASCAR pit crew, one Ford knew it could trust. Even though Glen and his brothers were branching out into a new racing discipline, they retained discipline on pit road.
Oh, screaming engines going by, it kind of gets jumped. But when that little darted off of the track down, coming down the pit road, I got in at 21 mode, and everything just went so smooth.
I remember telling Jimmy Clark, now it's real important you stop at the right place, because if you overshoot it, the hose will buckle, and if you don't get there, they won't reach. He said, you just tell me where to stop. He put it right on the money.
The pit stop takes 17 seconds. Very short. Clark comes down the straightaway and moves back into the lead. Gets with it for Andretti is coming up.
The rest of them didn't make nearly as good a stops as we did.
Jimmy Clark crosses the finish line to become the victor of the 1965 Indianapolis 500.
We had to do that for Ford. They was our buddies. And it's the most worldwide attention we ever got for anything.
Bill France Sr. was up in the stand, and he was up there watching us, and he jumped up and said, that's my boys, that's my boys.
I think that was huge for NASCAR, that they would be selected to go to Indianapolis and revolutionize their pit stops there, and just blew everybody away.
Achievements like the win at Indy proved Glen Wood's team was revolutionary. with a tight-knit crew pitting the top car in NASCAR and future Hall of Famers in the driver's seat. It was now time to carve out the next chapter in the Wood Brothers story.
Mid-'80s, Glen and Ed had been going around with us for several years before that, and it began to be obvious that they needed to learn this so that they could do it and we didn't have to.
Got to where we were actually working around the car. We were always Daddy's helper.
Just like building a gear or something. Daddy would make you stand there and show you how to build a gear. So at least you had the knowledge of how it went together. Whether you built any more or not, it didn't really matter. But he wanted you to know what was going on. And at some point, Daddy gave each of us 5% of the company. And then later, he started giving us another 5 and another 5. And pretty soon, about 1983, okay, we're like 25% owners each. And it's almost like flipping a light switch. Hey, wait a minute, this might be what we're doing the rest of our life.
He had a lot of faith in his sons, and his sons are very smart and very talented. One of the big reasons we're still in it today is because they were smart enough to keep it running.
When we came along, we kind of brought some of the younger drivers, it was a different time. They were all just like family, just like Pearson and Cale and Marvin and all those guys were.
Kyle Petty in the car number 21. The Wood Brothers spent a long time been in victory lane here. Glen and Eddie and all the Wood Brothers, 1982.
He had brought this business along. He had brought it to a point to where when Eddie and Lynn, when I started driving for him in the mid-'80s, it was their time to take the business and grow the business. And he was there to help them. He was there to guide them. He was there to steer them.
Kyle Petty is going to win the Coca-Cola 600. What a day for Kyle Petty and the Wood Brothers team.
By lifting a new generation onto the NASCAR stage, a second generation of Woods carried their father's name forward.
At the line, who wins it? I believe Dale Jarrett won it. Here goes Michael Waltrip for the lead. Michael Waltrip takes advantage of Earn Arnold touching. What a super run for the Wood Brothers Ford. Here they come to the flag. Sadler wins it. How about Elliott Sadler? His first win, and for the Wood Brothers, some of the nicest people in auto racing.
Really, it was kind of seamless. It was the same. I don't know, it just worked.
After a quiet, dominating career, Glen Wood had prepared his children to carry Wood Brothers Racing forward. NASCAR shifted toward multi-car, highly specialized teams during this transition, but tradition is ingrained in the spirit of the 21. Tradition, the strength drawn from deep roots, brought Wood Brothers Racing yet another moment forever grafted into the legend of NASCAR.
I started going to Daytona in 1947, and I've been down there every year since. We'd never seen long straightaways like they had down there. That was a year before NASCAR was formed. So we've always went to Daytona to the races.
I love the road trip. So right before Daytona, I was like, man, I'm just gonna cruise down, take my time. The plane actually left like an hour after I did, so they beat me there by like 4 hours. But I just like to take it all in, just kind of calm down and get ready for what's gonna be ahead. The background that they've built with those kind of drivers, for them to take that kind of experience and put that faith in me, that means a lot to me. Lynn and Eddie and Leonard and Glen and all those guys with the Wood Brothers, they're a great family. I mean, they're really supportive. Think back of the famous paint schemes, the red and the white and the gold, and it's just a lot of history. It's cool to be the next step in that history.
Going for green, white checker, 2 laps to glory.
Ready? Green flag, green flag.
Come down to that finish. you know anything can happen then.
The 20-year-old Trevor Bayne driving the legendary Wood Brothers number 21, hopefully to victory in the Daytona 500, but he's got work to do.
Trevor Bayne in his second Sprint Cup start will lead them to the white flag.
And one of the women there just jumped up and down like we'd won the race. I says, that was a white flag. Oh. So we got to go another lap.
We got two cars out the back that could come into play. Young Trevor Bayne driving for his life on the final lap of the Daytona 500. Labonte takes a peek to the outside, tucks right back in. When will the challenge come?
Something's got to give. Here comes Carl Edwards. He's got momentum. David Gilliland giving him a shove to the inside of Labonte. Now Trevor Bayne will cross over the final time off 4.
Trevor Bayne gets the win for the Wood Brothers, and they're dancing on pit road.
You just want all right, baby. I hear you. You are the man. Kidding me?
Oh my goodness. The Wood Brothers return to victory lane at Daytona. The red, the white, the gold numbers. It is the 5th Daytona 500 win and the 98th career win for the Wood Brothers.
The youngest driver here with the oldest continuous racing team. The Wood Brothers back in victory lane at Daytona.
Am I dreaming right now?
I realized that everybody around me was affected by this. I was just glad I got to be that little puzzle piece that fit into that.
I was fixing to go to victory lane. I didn't really even know where to go. I didn't know whether it was this way or this way. And I felt this presence coming up. And I looked up and it was Richard Petty. And he said, where's your dad? I'm take him to victory lane. He went and got him around that shoulder, you know, how he does. And I thought, I'm going to watch this.
Can you climb across here? I need to go. Yeah, I can do that.
I think that win reignited what fans years ago knew about them. Maybe some had forgotten.
It's been maybe 20 years ago that some of the prominent car owners had said something about that time had passed us by. And, well, I think the board decided it hadn't passed them by.
Other than maybe when they won their first Daytona 500, which was, you know, your first one's your first one. But I think it's probably the biggest thing that's happened to our race team since then.
We made 7 decades for our family of winning races.
There's been some spectacular victories, but this one was pretty good, and I think it's one of the prouder moments that he's had.
I don't know. I just couldn't believe it happened.
You know, he started with nothing and, you know, worked hard his whole life to get what he's got.
He epitomizes what NASCAR was and what NASCAR is and what NASCAR can be.
The class that he brought to our sport, it's pretty amazing all they've done.
But it's not his legacy. It's a family legacy.
Having to work under a shade tree to build those race cars and to carry that through more than 60 years and still building is very, very special for Glen and this team.
His handshake was and is all you need. That's what I want to be.